There are some stories that begin with a scream. Others begin with silence. But this story, begins with the sound of a car engine humming through the quiet streets of Erie, Pennsylvania. It's a Wednesday afternoon, August 28, 2003. The kind of day that should have passed without history taking notice. Yet in less than 2 hours, the world would hear a name that would forever be tied to one of the strangest, most tragic crimes in American history. Brian Douglas Wells, a pizza delivery man who walked into a bank with a bomb strapped around his neck. At 1:30 p.m., the sun pressed lazily against the cracked asphalt of Peach Street. The air was heavy and still, the type of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. A rusty white Geo Metro, the kind of car that tells you its owner never had much to spare, rolled up to the entrance of Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. The place smelled of dough and tomato sauce and grease, the scent of working-class America. Inside, Brian Wells moved with the tired rhythm of a man who'd done this for years. He was 46, with thinning hair and a mustache that hung like a shadow under his nose. His face carried the softness of someone who'd never quite figured out how to escape small-town gravity. For 10 years, he had delivered pizzas in this town, earning just enough to keep the lights on and the car running. His coworkers liked him. Quiet, reliable. A man who smiled politely but seemed content to drift through life unnoticed. No criminal record. No enemies. No reason for what was about to happen. That afternoon, the phone rang. A voice on the other end ordered 2 small pepperoni pizzas to a location on the outskirts of town. The caller said the delivery was to be made to 8631 Peach Street, a remote address leading to a television transmission tower behind a set of trees. Nothing unusual in the order. Nothing alarming in the tone. Brian took the slip, grabbed the pizzas, and drove off in his car, as he had done thousands of times before. But what he didn't know was that he was driving straight into a trap. The dirt road leading to the tower was quiet. He pulled over. The car door creaked open, and he stepped out with the pizzas in hand. The summer air clung to his skin, still and uncomfortable. The sound of cicadas filled the air. It was supposed to be a routine delivery. Instead, in the shadows beyond the trees, something or someone was waiting for him. No one knows exactly what words were exchanged in those next few minutes, or how it began. What is known is that Brian Wells would never leave that place the same. When he emerged, he was carrying a cane that doubled as a shotgun, and around his neck, locked tight against his skin, was a metal collar with 4 protruding pipe bombs attached. He claimed later that they ambushed him, that they forced him to wear the collar, that he was a hostage. And maybe in some way he was, or maybe he wasn't. That's the part that would haunt investigators for years. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He had been given instructions, step-by-step orders scrawled on pages that would later be found in his car. Rob the bank. Obtain $250,000. Follow the instructions exactly. Do not defy us. His life depended on it, or so he believed. At 2:30 p.m., he parked outside the PNC Bank on Peach Street. Surveillance footage would later show him walking calmly through the glass doors. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He moved as if rehearsed, mechanical, detached. His cane disguised as a shotgun in one hand, a note in the other. The note he handed to the teller was polite, written in neat block letters. It said, "Gather $250,000 in a bag. No dye packs. No alarms. You have 15 minutes or the bomb will explode." The teller's hands trembled. The bank wasn't used to violence, not in Erie. They didn't have $250,000 on hand. They gave him $8,702, everything they could gather in panic. He took it, tucked it in his bag, and walked out as calmly as he had entered. Outside, the world was still turning, unaware of the storm about to break. He got into his car, placed the bag beside him, and began driving toward the next set of instructions left for him. The notes told him to follow a scavenger hunt, retrieve clues, find keys, and complete a series of tasks that would supposedly lead to the collar being removed. But he wouldn't make it far. Less than 15 minutes later, state troopers spotted his car in a parking lot near a gas station, not far from the I-79 interchange. They surrounded him, guns drawn. The scene was almost surreal. Dozens of officers, rifles aimed. While in the middle sat a man wearing a metal device that looked like something out of a nightmare. He raised his hands, confused, frightened, telling them over and over that the bomb was real, that it was going to go off. The officers pulled him from the car, forced him to sit cross-legged on the pavement, and backed away. They didn't know what to do. No one did. Television crews began to arrive. Sirens wailed in the distance. A helicopter circled overhead. The world began watching a scene that felt like fiction. Minutes ticked by. The bomb squad had been called, but they were still miles away. Brian's voice trembled as he said the words again. "It's going to go off." He pleaded quietly, almost politely. "It's going to go off." The officers stood behind their cars, weapons still raised, but helpless. No one wanted to get close. And then it happened. A faint beep, then another, then a fast succession of electronic clicks. Brian's head jerked slightly. His breathing quickened. He began to tremble. He looked around desperately for help, but no one moved. And in an instant, a flash of orange and gray smoke burst from his chest. A deafening crack split the air. His body jerked backward, stiff, then went still. The bomb had detonated. The officers froze. The crowd screamed. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind against the pavement. His lifeless body lay there, smoke rising faintly from the metal ring still around his neck. It was over, or so they thought. But that explosion was just the beginning. The bomb squad arrived 3 minutes later. Too late to save him. Too late to change what the cameras had already captured. News footage would soon broadcast the moment across the country. The image of a pizza delivery man sitting on the ground with a bomb around his neck burned into America's memory. Within hours, the story spread everywhere. The bizarre, the grotesque, the unimaginable. The investigation began immediately. FBI agents, state police, and ATF units swarmed the area. The parking lot was cordoned off. Technicians in protective suits carefully examined the remains of the device. It wasn't crude. It was sophisticated, intricate wiring, multiple triggers, combination locks, decoys. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. This wasn't a simple trap. It was a design meant to terrify, to control, to send a message. They searched his car. Inside, they found the set of instructions. Pages detailing the steps he was to follow. It read like a twisted treasure map. Go to the McDonald's on Peach Street. Find the next clue beneath the sign. Then another destination, and another. If he had followed them all, it would have taken him hours to complete. The bomb was timed to go off much sooner. It was impossible. It was never meant to be completed. It was a death sentence disguised as a game. As agents examined the pages, questions began to spiral. Who wrote them? Who made the call to the pizzeria? Who set the trap? And most importantly, was Brian Wells an innocent pawn or a willing participant? Back at Mamma Mia's pizzeria, the coworkers stared at the television in disbelief. They had watched the footage of the man they knew, the one who joked quietly over lunch, who never caused trouble, now lying dead on the pavement with a bomb strapped to his neck. None of it made sense. The order had come in like any other. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. They remembered the phone call, the voice asking for a delivery to the tower site. They remembered Brian leaving the store, pizzas in hand, never realizing he'd just accepted his final delivery. The tower site itself, when police searched it, felt like a scene from a ghost story. The dirt road led to a patch of open land surrounded by tall weeds. There, investigators found a strange assortment of items, handwritten notes, a shoe print, a small pile of cigarette butts, and remnants of duct tape. It was clear that something had happened there, but what exactly no one could say. There were no witnesses, no cameras, just the stillness of the empty field, holding onto its secrets. As night fell, Erie descended into an uneasy quiet. Reporters camped outside the police station. Theories spread like wildfire. Some said Brian had been forced. Others said he was part of the plan all along. People whispered that maybe he thought it was fake, a prank, a stunt, something that would make him quick cash. But the explosion had erased any certainty. The truth was tangled somewhere between his fear and his choices. The autopsy confirmed the obvious: death by explosive device. But it also revealed something else. He wasn't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. He hadn't been beaten or restrained beyond the collar. His wrists bore faint marks, suggesting they might have been bound at some point. Yet nothing conclusive. Nothing that told the full story. The FBI dubbed the case collar bomb. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The device's complexity, the psychological manipulation, the meticulous planning. It all pointed to someone highly intelligent, deeply disturbed, and intimately familiar with how to play with human fear. Days turned into weeks. Then, out of nowhere, another body surfaced. A man named James Roden, found dead in a freezer inside a woman's garage. That woman was Marjorie Deal Armstrong, a name that at the time meant nothing to the public. But to investigators, it would soon become the key to unraveling the puzzle. Marjorie was known in Erie, intelligent, volatile, brilliant even, but dangerous. She had a long history of mental illness, multiple arrests, and a tendency toward manipulation. People who knew her called her a genius trapped in madness. Years earlier, she had shot and killed the boyfriend, but claimed self-defense. Now, with a dead man in her freezer and connections to others in the case, the lines began to connect. But that was still far ahead. In those early days, the focus remained on Brian. His friends and family were interviewed endlessly. His mother, Rose, spoke through tears, insisting her son was innocent. He was just doing his job, she said. He was just delivering pizzas. The words carried the weight of disbelief, the ache of a parent trying to make sense of the senseless. The FBI's behavioral analysts began to piece together the timeline. The call to the pizzeria had been placed from a payphone near a gas station. The voice, recorded faintly, was male, calm, unemotional. The caller had chosen the TV tower location specifically, isolated, out of sight, perfect for an ambush. Whoever planned this had thought through every detail. Then came the device itself. It was designed with redundancies, meaning even if one mechanism failed, others would ensure detonation. It had fake locks, dummy wires, and decoy triggers, meant to delay anyone trying to defuse it. On the top of the collar was a digital timer. It wasn't random. It was precision. The level of design was beyond what a casual criminal could create. This was the work of someone with technical skill, someone who had studied bomb-making, electronics, and control psychology, someone who wanted to orchestrate chaos while watching others scramble to understand it. In the weeks that followed, the town of Erie became the center of a nightmare. Every news network descended on the city. The Pizza Bomber, collar death, bank robbery gone wrong. The headlines turned the tragedy into spectacle. But beneath the noise, investigators were quietly uncovering a web that stretched far beyond one man and one device. They discovered that Brian had spent time with a man named Bill Rothstein, a handyman and former shop teacher who lived just a few miles from the tower site. Bill was intelligent, articulate, and strangely calm when questioned. He claimed he had nothing to do with the bomb, but something about him unsettled agents. They later learned that he was the one who called police to report the dead body of James Roden, the same man found in Marjorie D. Armstrong's freezer. It was too much coincidence to ignore. But that story, the story of how Bill, Marjorie, and a group of others became entangled in a conspiracy that led to a man dying on live television, was still just a whisper on the horizon. For now, all anyone could see was a man dead on the pavement, a collar bomb, and a mystery that refused to make sense. As the first week ended, investigators gathered in a dark room filled with maps, photographs, and diagrams. On one board, the words "collar bomb case" were written in red marker. Beneath it, the timeline, the call, the delivery, the bank robbery, the explosion. Every event lined up neatly. Every question remained unanswered. Why did Brian go along with it? Did he think he'd survive? Was he promised something? Who placed the device on him? And most haunting of all, did he know deep down that it was going to end like this? In the footage moments before the bomb goes off, there's a look on his face, something between fear and disbelief, like he was still waiting for someone to tell him it was over, that it was all a mistake, that he could go home. But no one did. The seconds ticked away, and the truth exploded with him. The world loves to find meaning in chaos, but sometimes there is none. Sometimes evil hides behind the ordinary. A phone call, a pizza order, a quiet afternoon. And sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who can convince others that they have no choice. When the night finally swallowed Erie that day, the street where Brian had died was still cordoned off. The smell of smoke lingered in the air. His car sat there, silent, evidence markers scattered like ghosts of a day's madness. The cameras were gone, the crowd dispersed, but the ground itself felt changed, as if it remembered what it had seen. Some crimes leave bloodstains. Others leave questions. This one left both. In the days to come, new names would emerge. Lies would surface. The dead would speak through their secrets, and the living would reveal their darkness. What began as a simple pizza delivery would unravel into one of the most bizarre and haunting criminal conspiracies in modern American history. But that was only the beginning. The night after the explosion, Erie was a city holding its breath. The parking lot where Brian Wells had died was still cordoned off with yellow tape, fluttering faintly in the wind under the glare of police floodlights. Rain threatened, but never came, leaving the air thick with the scent of burnt metal and asphalt. For investigators, the scene was no longer just evidence. It was a message carved into reality. Someone had built that bomb not merely to kill, but to send a statement that they were smarter, colder, and far ahead of everyone trying to understand them. Inside the FBI's temporary command post, the air buzzed with tension. Maps were pinned to the walls, Photographs clipped beneath harsh fluorescent light. Images of the collar, the cane gun, the bank footage, the instructions. Every agent knew they were looking at something that didn't fit any known pattern. Crimes had motives. This one seemed to have layers: money, manipulation, pride, control. But most of all, it carried a sense of orchestration, like a performance written for a terrified audience. Special Agent Jerry Clark sat silently before the photos, piecing together the timeline over and over. None of it made sense. The scavenger hunt instructions, the impossibility of completion, the complexity of the bomb. It was designed to fail. So why involve Brian at all? Unless his failure was the point. Unless the entire thing had been built around that moment, the detonation, the spectacle, the confusion it would create. The next morning brought fresh reports. Someone had come forward claiming to know something about the tower site, where Brian said he'd been ambushed. Investigators followed the lead out to a quiet stretch of land at the edge of town. The area was desolate, marked only by a metal tower and overgrown weeds. They searched every inch, finding scraps of paper, footprints, and a single tire track leading toward the main road. Whoever had been there had covered their trail well. Still, there was a lingering presence, as if the air itself remembered the fear that had unfolded there. Days turned into a blur of interviews, reports, and speculation. The story had already taken on a life of its own in the media. The Pizza Bomber, they called it. News anchors smiled grimly as they described the events with words like bizarre, diabolical, and unprecedented. For the people of Erie, it was a nightmare come to life. For the investigators, it was a labyrinth with no clear exit. Then, just as the initial chaos began to settle, a new call shattered the silence. It came from a man named Bill Rothstein, reporting something unimaginable. He told police there was a body in his freezer. When officers arrived at his property, they were met by an oddly calm, articulate man in his 60s. His house sat on a wooded hill, quiet and ordinary except for the faint metallic hum of machines somewhere inside. Rothstein led them to the garage. There, wedged inside an old white chest freezer, lay the frozen remains of James Roden, a local man in his 40s who had been missing for weeks. Wrapped in a tarp, stiff and lifeless, the body had been stored like an afterthought. Rothstein didn't try to run. He didn't even seem panicked. He explained almost politely that a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong had killed Roden and forced him to help hide the body. He said she had threatened to kill him too if he didn't comply. His voice was calm, his eyes calculating, as if he were telling a story he had rehearsed. The detectives exchanged glances. They had heard the name before. Marjorie had a history. Brilliant, volatile, dangerous. Years ago, she'd shot her boyfriend, claiming it was self-defense. She was known for her sharp intelligence and unpredictable rage. People described her as someone whose mind was too crowded with thoughts, too heavy with anger. But no one imagined she could be connected to the collar bomb case. At least not yet. Rothstein told him he had finally decided to come forward because the situation was getting out of control. He couldn't live with a corpse in his house any longer. But as investigators began to question him, something about his story didn't add up. He seemed too composed, too deliberate in what he shared and what he avoided. When they asked about the collar bomb incident, he shrugged. He claimed to know nothing. Yet his property was only a few miles from a site where Brian had supposedly been ambushed. Coincidence was growing thinner by the hour. When they finally arrested Marjorie Deal Armstrong, the scene felt like a collision of chaos and calculation. Her house was cluttered, every surface buried under piles of papers, books, and broken furniture. She was sitting at her kitchen table, chain-smoking, eyes darting like trapped light. She didn't deny that Roden was dead. She didn't even seem surprised that police had found him. What she did deny was being the monster people thought she was. She said she'd had to kill him because he was abusive. She said Rothstein had promised to help her hide the body because he loved her. Her words tangled in contradictions, shifting with every question. But beneath the madness, investigators sensed something else: control. Marjorie was erratic, yes, but she was also deliberate. She had an intellect that could slice through pretense. And when the topic of the collar bomb robbery surfaced, her reactions became sharper, more guarded. She denied involvement, but her eyes betrayed calculation. It was then that agents began to realize the two cases weren't separate threads at all. They were the same tapestry. The body in the freezer, the bomb collar, the scavenger notes, the overlapping names and relationships that formed a circle too tight to ignore. Rothstein and Marjorie knew each other well. In fact, they had once been engaged. That link alone shifted the investigation into darker territory. Rothstein was interrogated for hours. He answered every question with calm precision, occasionally drifting into anecdotes about his intelligence, his inventions, his education. He wanted them to know he was smarter than the average man. But every time they tried to connect him directly to the bomb, he sidestepped, deflecting with ease. He was cooperative, but unyielding. A man who knew exactly how far he could go without incriminating himself. Then, in a moment that would later haunt the investigation, Rothstein mentioned that the collar bomb device had been designed by a group of people, and that some things are better left unsolved. It was cryptic, almost taunting. When agents pressed him, he smiled and said he didn't want to die in prison. He would take the rest of the story to his grave. And within months he did, dead of lymphoma before any charges could be filed. His death left a void. The man who had built walls of intellect around himself had taken the blueprints of his deceit with him. But before he died, he had given them just enough truth to lead to the next door, Marjorie. As investigators dug deeper into Marjorie's life, the portrait of chaos sharpened. She was brilliant in a way that frightened people. A woman who could quote law, science, and psychology with equal ease, yet couldn't control the storms in her own mind. She had been diagnosed with multiple disorders, treated and released countless times, and had a long history of violence toward men she felt had betrayed her. But beneath the instability, there was something colder, a fascination with control and manipulation. She didn't crave attention. She craved mastery. She wanted to be the one who decided how things ended. During her interviews, she oscillated between tears and rage, denial and accusation. She claimed Rothstein was framing her. She said Rodin's death had nothing to do with the bomb plot. But investigators weren't convinced. The more she spoke, the more she revealed that she knew details she shouldn't have. She referred to Brian Wells by name before anyone had told her who he was. She mentioned the scavenger hunt. She even hinted that she knew why the bomb was designed the way it was. But then she would pull back, smirking faintly, as if to remind them she was still in control. Meanwhile, forensic experts continued to study the bomb. The more they examined it, the clearer it became that the device had been constructed by someone with mechanical expertise. Its components were meticulously organized: steel plates, copper wiring, triple trigger redundancies. One expert described it as a work of engineering genius built for evil. The precision pointed again toward Rothstein, who had once been a shop teacher and amateur inventor. But with him dead, the circle of guilt shifted entirely onto Marjorie. Still, there was something missing. A motive that made sense. The money from the bank wasn't enough to justify such complexity. The device was designed for something far more elaborate than a simple robbery. The instructions read like a riddle, one that could only have been written by someone who wanted to watch others fail. It was about power, not wealth. The money was bait. The real prize was control. Weeks passed before a new name emerged: Kenneth Barnes, a fishing buddy of Marjorie's, an ex-television repairman, and a convicted felon with a reputation for loose talk. He lived in a clutter house where televisions flickered across every wall, each one tuned to a different channel, filling the rooms with a low electric hum. When investigators questioned him, he was defensive, but not clever enough to hide his nerves. He denied involvement at first, but when he realized Marjorie had already named him in one of her manic rants, he started to talk. What he revealed painted the first clear picture of the madness behind the crime. He said that Marjorie had been the mastermind, that she had planned to rob the bank to get money to pay him to kill her father, an elderly man whose inheritance she wanted. She needed someone to execute the robbery. Rothstein helped design the device. Barnes helped coordinate. Brian Wells, according to Barnes, was supposed to be their unwitting participant. A man tricked into believing the bomb was fake, a pawn in their game. But something went wrong. Someone panicked, and when it began to spiral, they let him die. Investigators cross-referenced every claim, every time and location. Bit by bit, the impossible story began to take form. The connections between the frozen body, the bomb, the bank robbery, and the dead delivery man all converged into one chilling truth. It had all been orchestrated by people who believed they were too intelligent to be caught. They had built a plot around manipulation, greed, and ego, a symphony of control conducted by unstable minds. By the time 2004 arrived, the case had become a national obsession. The public wanted answers, But the investigation was like peeling away layers of deceit, each one more grotesque than the last. Marjorie continued to play games from her cell, alternating between confession and denial. She sent letters filled with cryptic phrases, each sentence blurring the line between brilliance and madness. "They think they know everything," she wrote once. But the only real genius in this story is the one they can't define. Investigators knew what she meant. She wasn't talking about Rothstein or Barnes. She was talking about herself. For the agents working the case, it became clear that every person involved had been both victim and perpetrator. Each one had been manipulated by the other in an endless loop of deception. Marjorie used Rothstein. Rothstein used Brian. Barnes used them all. And somewhere in that chaos, Brian Wells, quiet, ordinary, the man who just delivered pizzas, had been caught in the center of a storm he could never have escaped. His family continued to plead for his innocence. They said he was tricked, forced, betrayed. They said he never would have done something like this willingly. The FBI was less certain. Some evidence suggested he might have known more than he let on. A witness came forward saying he had seen Brian at Rothstein's house days before the robbery. Another claimed he'd heard Brian talking about a big plan that would make him some money. But whether he was complicit or coerced no longer mattered. He was dead, and the people who had truly orchestrated the crime were still alive, twisting the truth into whatever shape they pleased. As the investigation stretched on, the people of Erie began to move on, or at least tried to. The streets returned to their quiet rhythm. The Tower Road grew over with weeds again, and the memory of that August afternoon faded into a legend whispered at diners and bars. But for the investigators, the echoes of that day never stopped. The footage of Brian Wells sitting on the pavement replayed in their minds like a wound that refused to heal. Every night, Agent Clark found himself thinking about the moment just before the detonation. The stillness, the sound of the ticking, the look in Brian's eyes. It wasn't the look of a man who believed he was about to die for something he planned. It was the look of a man who realized too late that he had been a disposable piece in someone else's design. And that truth, more than anything, haunted him. The night after the explosion, Erie was quieter than usual. It wasn't peace. It was shock disguised as silence. The streets that had been crowded with flashing lights and murmuring crowds were now empty. Yet the echoes of that afternoon still clung to the air. Inside the police department, the faces of detectives looked washed in fatigue and disbelief. Nobody wanted to admit what they were already starting to suspect, that the man who died wearing the collar bomb might not have been a simple victim or a random pawn. The FBI evidence technicians spent hours cataloging every fragment from the scene. The pieces of the metal collar, the shrapnel embedded in the pavement, the handwritten notes that had been found in Brian Wells' car. Each item was photographed, bagged, and tagged with quiet reverence. The pages of the note were strange. Precise instructions written in an almost obsessive hand, demanding that Wells rob the bank. Then follow a scavenger hunt of clues to unlock the bomb from around his neck. The words read like the script of a madman, but whoever wrote them understood how to weaponize fear. Agent Jerry Clark had worked many cases, but this one was already bending his sense of logic. He stared at the pile of evidence and felt the weight of contradiction. A pizza delivery man turned bank robber, claiming to be a hostage, dying from a bomb too complex for a casual crime. It felt like the outline of something larger, a conspiracy stitched together from desperation and madness. While investigators tried to untangle the instructions in the notes, the autopsy of Brian Wells confirmed the obvious. The device had been real, designed with precision. Whoever built it had a deep understanding of electronics and mechanical engineering, the locks, the timing mechanism, the redundancy of the wires. It wasn't the work of an amateur. That single fact transformed the case. What had looked like a bizarre one-man robbery was now a federal investigation into a sophisticated, lethal plot. Erie wasn't used to federal attention. Reporters swarmed the streets, vans lined up outside the FBI field office, and locals watched their town's name crawl across national headlines. The words Pizza Bomber began to circulate, an awful nickname that simplified what was anything but simple. In the following days, as agents retraced Brian Wells' last hours, they began at his workplace, Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. His coworkers remembered the call that came in around 1:30 that afternoon. A delivery order to a rural address on the outskirts of town, the kind of request they rarely got. Wells had been his usual quiet self, polite and punctual, and he'd left to make the delivery in his rust-colored Geo Metro. He never returned. The address he was sent to led investigators to a lonely dirt road near a transmission tower, surrounded by thick trees and silence. They found tire tracks, footprints, and an uneaten pizza box lying in the weeds. The air out there was heavy with stillness, as if the woods themselves had witnessed something terrible and were refusing to speak it. That's where the trail began, and where the story started to twist into something that defied easy sense. As they searched deeper, the name Bill Rothstein surfaced. He lived not far from the tower, in an old house that overlooked the woods like a patient observer. Rothstein was a tall man, intelligent, with a past that hinted at quiet eccentricity. Years earlier, he had worked as a handyman and tinkerer. People described him as a man who could build or fix anything. That detail immediately caught the FBI's attention. But what made Rothstein more than a name on a map was a phone call that came just weeks later, on September 20th. A call came into 911 from a man sounding calm, even polite. He said he had something to report, a frozen body in his garage. When police arrived, that same calm man greeted them at the door. It was Bill Rothstein, inside a chest freezer. They found the body of a man named James Roden, wrapped in plastic. Rothstein's explanation was as strange as the call itself. He told police that the body had been put there by a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong, a former girlfriend known in Erie for her intelligence and volatility. According to Rothstein, she'd shot Roden during an argument and then asked him for help hiding the body. He claimed he had finally decided to tell the truth because the guilt was too much to bear. Investigators looked at him with quiet skepticism. Rothstein's story sounded rehearsed, but he was articulate, almost too calm for a man with a corpse in his garage. The puzzle grew thicker. What did this murder have to do with the Pizza Bomber case? At first, it seemed unrelated, but then fragments began to overlap in eerie ways. The frozen body discovery wasn't just another crime. It was a thread that began to connect every name the agents had been circling on their maps. Rothstein, Marjorie, and Wells. People whose lives seemed to orbit each other in quiet, forgotten corners of Erie. The closer investigators looked, the more they realized that this was no random act of violence, but the residue of something premeditated, something with a purpose. In interviews, Marjorie Deal Armstrong came across as a paradox. She spoke with conviction, intelligent and persuasive, yet her words carried an undertone of mania. Her history was layered with tragedy and instability, multiple degrees, a sharp mind dulled by mental illness, a string of failed relationships, and accusations that shadowed her past. Several of her former partners had died under suspicious or sudden circumstances, but no charges had ever held. When agents pressed her about James Roden, her story shifted in patterns: defiance, tears, rationalization, fury. She painted herself as a victim, manipulated by Rothstein, framed for a crime she hadn't wanted. But the forensic evidence in Rothstein's garage told a different story. What stood out most to the agents wasn't just her volatility, but her relationship with Rothstein. They had known each other for years, two highly intelligent, controlling personalities drawn together by something more than affection, a shared arrogance, a belief in their own ability to outthink everyone else. When Marjorie was finally arrested for Roden's murder, Rothstein continued to talk with investigators. He seemed willing to cooperate, but there was always an air of control in the way he spoke, as if he were directing a play only he could see fully. When agents questioned him about the collar bomb, he deflected with ease, claiming he had no knowledge of it. Yet subtle inconsistencies in his story betrayed the possibility of deeper involvement. The mechanical complexity of the bomb, the language in the ransom notes, the precision of the instructions. They all hinted at someone with technical skill and a cold, organized mind. Rothstein fit that description uncomfortably well. Days became weeks, and the pieces of the case started to arrange themselves into a strange geometry. Investigators learned that Brian Wells had occasionally delivered pizzas to Rothstein's neighborhood. He was quiet, unassuming, and sometimes spent time with people who hung around the fringes of town's poorer areas, including a man named Kenneth Barnes, an ex-con with a taste for quick money and tangle schemes. Barnes would eventually become a crucial part of the puzzle, but at that moment, he was just another name that floated through the haze of rumor and speculation. What connected him, Wells, Rothstein, and Marjorie was still elusive, but the pattern was emerging. A circle of desperate people, each with their own delusions of control, colliding in one grotesque plan. As autumn deepened, Rothstein's health began to decline. He was diagnosed with cancer, And as his body weakened, investigators sensed the window closing. They pressed him harder, searching for confession or clarity. In his final interviews, he gave cryptic statements, describing himself as the smartest person in the room, lamenting the incompetence of others, yet never directly admitting guilt. Then, before any full truth could be extracted, Bill Rothstein died. His death left behind a vacuum, and a lingering suspicion that he had taken crucial secrets to his grave. But death didn't stop the momentum of the case. It only darkened it. Investigators turned their full attention back to Marjorie Deal Armstrong. By then, she was incarcerated for Roden's murder, but she was eager to talk, though talk with Marjorie was never simple. She offered partial confessions wrapped in manipulation, constantly shifting blame and rewriting history mid-sentence. She claimed Rothstein had been the true mastermind, that he had built the bomb, that she had only known fragments of the plan. But her accounts of meetings, motives, and timing didn't always match physical evidence. The more she spoke, the more it became clear that this was not a single plot hatched by one evil mind, but a tangle of intersecting greed, ego, and mental illness. Each revelation pulled the story deeper into the realm of the absurd. The plan to rob the bank had allegedly been concocted to pay off debts, settle grudges, and feed illusions of superiority. Rothstein wanted to prove his genius. Marjorie wanted money to fund her fantasies. Barnes wanted an easy payday. And in the middle of that chaos stood Brian Wells, a man who might have been a willing participant at first, but ended up as the expendable piece of their game. The FBI agents investigating the case began to feel something unusual. Not just professional curiosity, but a haunting awareness that they were witnessing a portrait of human corruption in miniature. It wasn't just about crime anymore, it was about how loneliness, arrogance, and moral decay could fuse into something monstrous. Late one night, Agent Clark sat at his desk, staring at photographs spread before him. The collar, the pizza boxes, the faces of Rothstein and Marjorie. The question that had haunted him since day one still lingered. Was Brian Wells a victim or a conspirator? The evidence pointed both ways, tangled like the wires inside the bomb that had killed him. Some nights, the town of Erie felt smaller, as though the darkness of that one act had shrunk its world. The case files grew thicker, but the answers stayed blurred. And somewhere in the middle of all that uncertainty, a quiet realization began to form. Every one of them, Rothstein, Marjorie, Barnes, and Wells, had believed they could control something far bigger than themselves. In the end, the only thing they'd really created was chaos.